Welcome to Bedtime Science. Did you know that some communities have survived in places where temperatures drop below -50 degrees? Not for decades, but for thousands of years, passing knowledge from one generation to the next through nothing more than spoken words and shared firelight. Tonight, we explore the cultural traditions of isolated Arctic communities, the people who built entire civilizations of knowledge in the coldest, quietest corners of the Earth. In the next moments, we will gently move through how Arctic peoples learned to read ice, snow, and stars to navigate featureless white horizons. We'll look at how hunting traditions and food preservation allowed survival where almost nothing grows. We'll examine oral histories, myths, and seasonal ceremonies that held communities together across millennia. And we will consider what happens when ancient knowledge meets a rapidly warming world. Before we begin, if you find comfort here tonight, consider subscribing to join our quiet community. And if you are still awake, you can leave a soft comment about what topic we should explore next. Now let us begin. There is a place on Earth where the ground never thaws. Not in summer, not during any season within living memory. Beneath the surface, the soil has remained frozen for tens of thousands of years, a geological layer called permafrost that stretches across the northern reaches of Canada, Russia, Scandinavia, and Alaska. Above this frozen ground, the terrain is vast and white for much of the year. The horizon is a line where white meets white, with snow-covered earth merging into a pale sky until the two become nearly impossible to tell apart. In winter, the sun vanishes. For weeks in some latitudes and for months in the highest ones, the sky holds only darkness, broken by stars and the slow green curtains of the aurora. Temperatures fall to -40, -50 degrees. Wind crosses the open tundra without obstruction, carrying ice crystals that sting exposed skin in seconds. This is the Arctic, and for at least 20,000 years, people have lived here. Not merely visited, not passed through. They settled, raised families, developed languages and spiritual practices, engineered clothing and shelter, and built systems of knowledge so refined that modern scientists are still working to fully understand them. Consider the scale of that. 20,000 years. Writing wasn't invented until roughly 5,000 years ago. The Egyptian pyramids went up about 4,500 years ago. These Arctic communities were already ancient by the time the first hieroglyph was carved into stone. The human body is not naturally suited for this kind of cold. We are tropical animals in our deep evolutionary origins. Our ancestors walked the warm savannas of East Africa. Our skin is thin. Our body hair is sparse. We shiver, which is really just our muscles' crude attempt to generate warmth through rapid contraction. But the body adapts. It does so over lifetimes and over generations, in ways that run from the surface of the skin all the way down to the structure of DNA. One of the most well-documented adaptations is something called basal metabolic rate, the amount of energy your body burns just to keep itself running while at rest. Think of it as your body's idling speed. Research compiling data from indigenous communities across North America and Siberia found that Arctic indigenous men showed metabolic rates 7 to 19% higher than predicted values. Women showed elevations of 3 to 17%. That isn't a small difference. Your body, if you grew up in a temperate city, burns a certain baseline amount of fuel just sitting still. An Inuit hunter's body doing the same thing burns measurably more, like an engine that idles faster and throws off more heat as a byproduct. Here's what caught the attention of researchers. Non-indigenous men living in the same Arctic environments showed smaller elevations, somewhere between 3 and 14%. Non-indigenous women showed no clear elevation at all. That gap suggests this isn't purely about acclimatization, about getting used to the cold over time. Something genetic is at work too. Among the Yakut people of Siberia's Sakha Republic, measured basal metabolic rate was more than 20% higher than predictions based on body composition alone. And that elevation didn't line up with protein consumption or lifestyle patterns the way scientists expected. Something deeper was involved, something written into the code of cells across hundreds of generations. Deep inside the body, there is a type of tissue that most people don't think about. It's called brown adipose tissue, or brown fat. Unlike the white fat that stores energy beneath your skin, brown fat burns energy. It is packed with mitochondria, the tiny structures inside cells that convert fuel into usable power. In brown fat, these mitochondria contain a special protein called uncoupling protein 1, which essentially short-circuits the normal energy process and releases that energy directly as heat. This is called non-shivering thermogenesis, the body producing warmth without movement, without shaking, without conscious effort. A systematic review published in 2025 confirmed high brown fat activity in Arctic populations, backed by skin temperature measurements, thyroid hormone dynamics, and genetic markers linked to brown fat function. When researchers compared subarctic Finnish reindeer herders with Midwestern Americans, the herders showed an 8.7% jump in metabolic rate during cold exposure and preferentially burned fatty acids. Both are clear hallmarks of active brown fat working. And here's where it gets interesting for you. The data showed that adults who spent more time outdoors between the ages of 5 and 7 had greater brown fat activity later in life. The statistical link was clear. Early childhood exposure to cold appears to prime the body's heating system for decades, as if the body during a narrow developmental window decides how much internal furnace capacity it will carry for the rest of its existence. Mouse studies have confirmed something similar. Cold exposure during conception or early development leads to increased brown fat volume and stronger expression of thermogenic genes in offspring. The cold doesn't just test the body, it teaches it. Then there are the genetic adaptations that run even deeper. One of the most dramatic is a variant in a gene called CPT1, the specific version, designated P-Pro479 Leu, is carried by over 3/4 of Greenlandic Inuit. It is completely absent in populations of European, African, and East Asian ancestry. Geneticists describe it as one of the strongest selective sweeps ever documented in humans, meaning natural selection favored this variant so powerfully that it spread through the population with unusual speed and reach. What does it do? CPT1A encodes an enzyme that controls a critical bottleneck in how the liver processes fat. The Arctic variant alters this enzyme in ways that appear tailored to the traditional Inuit diet, which is extraordinarily high in long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids from marine mammals. In laboratory hepatocyte studies, a diet rich in the omega-3 fatty acids found in fish oil increased CPT1 enzyme activity by 61% compared to palm oil diets. The Arctic variant seems to counterbalance that surge, preventing the body from producing dangerously high levels of ketone bodies, while still allowing efficient fat burning. Think about it. The traditional diet shaped the genome. The genome enabled the diet. Neither makes full sense without the other. A separate study published in Science in 2015 identified another genetic fingerprint, this time in a gene cluster called FADS. It showed the strongest signal of genetic adaptation in Greenlandic Inuit of any gene region tested. These genes govern the body's own production of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. The ancestral versions of these genes, positively selected in Inuit populations, decrease the body's internal production of both types, presumably because the marine mammal diet already provides them in overwhelming abundance. Making more would tip the balance toward excess. These mutations are estimated to be at least 20,000 years old. They may have first appeared among the original Siberian populations, who migrated into the Arctic and stayed. So the body reshaped itself across millennia. Metabolic rates climbed. Brown fat became more active. Genetic variants rewired lipid processing. But the body's changes alone weren't enough to survive. You also needed to know where you were going. Picture this. You're standing on sea ice in January. The sun hasn't risen in weeks. It's -40. Visibility is poor because snow is blowing across the surface in dense sheets. There are no landmarks. No trees, no roads, no mountains on the horizon. Just frozen ocean stretching in every direction, white and flat and featureless. You need to travel 60 kilometers to reach a hunting ground. You need to arrive at a precise spot, because the breathing holes where seals surface are scattered across a wide area you can't see from here. No compass, no GPS, no map printed or digital. How do you get there? Inuit hunters have been solving this problem for millennia, and the system they built is one of the most sophisticated spatial cognition frameworks ever documented in any human population. It is an instinct. It's painstakingly learned through years of apprenticeship with expert elders, and it constitutes a formalized body of environmental science transmitted entirely through spoken instruction. The foundation of the entire system is wind. In the Igloolik region, Inuit recognize 4 primary winds. Uungnak blows from the west-northwest. Kaningnak arrives from the nor-northeast. Nijik comes from the east-southeast. And Akinak from the south-southwest. From these 4 primaries, the vocabulary allows recognition of up to 16 bearings, a wind compass as precise as any magnetic needle. But here's the thing. These wind directions don't require the wind to actually be blowing at that moment. They are written permanently into the surface of the snow. The prevailing Uungnak wind produces snowdrifts called ukulurate, a word meaning like a tongue. Their tips always point toward the west-northwest. Always. The east-southeast Nijik wind smooths the ground and creates drifts known as uluangnak, meaning like a cheek. These formations hold their shapes even when the air is perfectly still. A hunter crossing open ice in a blizzard, with visibility reduced to the faint glow of a snowmobile headlight, can feel the orientation of these drifts beneath the vehicle. By cutting across them at a known angle, the hunter maintains a precise compass bearing without seeing anything at all. A researcher once traveled with an Igloolik hunter during exactly this kind of blizzard and tracked their path using GPS. No stars visible, no coastal features, snow so thick you couldn't see past the headlight. The GPS track showed something striking. The hunter held a precise course across rough ice without a single moment of hesitation or correction. When asked how, the hunter said simply, "As long as you know where the winds blow, you can know where you are going." When researchers asked experienced hunters what conditions made navigation most difficult, nobody mentioned blizzards. Every one of them gave the same answer: fog in calm conditions. When there's no wind at all and the snow formations can't be felt, the entire spatial framework collapses into blankness. The wind compass is just one layer. Inuit wayfinding pulls together an extraordinary range of environmental cues, and each one fills a gap that the others leave. Sastrugi, the wind-carved snow ridges, serve as directional markers across open terrain. Large formations are called kayaklak. Small ripples on the surface are tumerinyik. Overhanging eroded shapes, where the base erodes faster than the top to create an anvil-like form, are called mapsuk. Each one encodes information about the wind that carved it, and the wind tells you where north is. Then there is the sky. A phenomenon called water sky produces dark patches on the undersides of low clouds, caused by open ocean reflecting less light than surrounding ice. If you're hunting marine mammals and need to find open leads in the pack ice, you look up. The clouds point the way. Temperature inversions create something the Inuit call puikakduk, a bending of light that reveals objects beyond the physical horizon. Distant walrus herds, boats, ice shelves that sit below the curve of the earth become visible, hovering faintly above the horizon line like a mirage that carries true information. Sound plays its part too. The racket of cliff-nesting birds on one side and crashing surf on the other keeps a sled driver oriented along the coast in thick summer fog. Young Inuit are taught something called oxiek, the silent game, where they learn to close their eyes and read the environment through hearing alone. And scattered across the terrain stand stone cairns called inuksuit. The singular form, inuksuk, translates as acting in the capacity of a human. These structures come in many designs: single uprights, stacked pyramids, pointers, window-shaped frames that align with distant sightlines. They mark meat caches, caribou drive funnels, river crossings, paths home. Some have stood for centuries. The neuroscience behind these abilities is rooted in a brain structure called the hippocampus. You might have heard about the London taxi driver studies, which showed that the hippocampus physically grows larger in people who regularly navigate complex routes over long periods. The longer a driver spent navigating London's tangled streets, the larger the posterior hippocampus became. The hippocampus encodes spatial information as narratives. Routes are stored as sequences of places experienced along the way, connected by the events and sensations that occurred at each point. Navigation, at the neural level, is a story problem. The brain figures out where you are by remembering the story of how you got there. This is exactly the mechanism Inuit wayfinding taps into. Place names connect to stories. Trails become narrative pathways linking locations of significance. The knowledge of how to cross 200 kilometers of sea ice is carried not as an abstract grid of coordinates, but as a spoken story, told by an elder, retained by a younger hunter, and retold to the next generation in the same narrative form. The depth of this cartographic memory can be startling. Inuit maps drawn purely from memory, using pencil or carved from wood or stone, have been documented to accurately render scale and direction across distances of up to 150,000 square miles. In Greenland's Amosalic archipelago, driftwood maps were carved with notches and raised shapes representing capes, islands, and inlets. They could be read by touch inside a kayaker's storage hatch during rain, fog, or polar darkness, and if you dropped one overboard, it floated. In one recorded case, A contemporary Inuit hunter set out to retrieve 7 fox traps his uncle had placed across 20 square kilometers of flat, seemingly identical tundra. The traps had been set 25 years earlier. They lay buried under snow. The hunter found all 7 in about 2 hours. That isn't an inherited instinct. That's a cognitive system refined over hundreds of generations, passed from mind to mind without a single written word. Let us rest here for a moment, before turning to what these communities hunted and how. The Arctic gives almost nothing freely. There are no orchards, no grain fields, no gardens. For most of the year, the ground is locked under ice and the sea is frozen solid. Everything that sustains life must be hunted. And hunting here is not what most people picture when they hear the word. It isn't a walk through autumn woods. It is patience measured in hours of absolute stillness, performed in conditions that would be dangerous even without the hunting itself. Think about seal hunting through breathing holes in the sea ice. A ringed seal keeps several breathing holes scattered across a wide area of ice, small openings it visits periodically to take a breath before diving again. A hunter identifies one of these holes, often by subtle signs invisible to an untrained eye, and then stands motionless beside it. For hours, in silence, in cold that numbs exposed skin within minutes, without shifting weight, because the seal beneath the surface can detect vibrations through the frozen floor. The hunter waits, harpoon ready, for the moment the seal surfaces to breathe, a window that might last 2 or 3 seconds. This isn't marksmanship. It's a test of stillness, focus, and the ability to remain alert during hours of physical discomfort with almost zero sensory input. In Inuit belief, the hunt carries a meaning that differs from most Western understandings. The animal is not taken by force. The animal chooses to give itself. A seal presents itself to a hunter who has demonstrated proper respect, who has waited with patience, who has observed the right rituals, who has treated previous catches with gratitude. The hunt is understood as a relationship, not a conquest. This isn't just spiritual decoration. It shapes behavior in ways that produce real ecological effects. A hunter who believes the animal must choose to present itself approaches the hunt with restraint and careful attention to balance between taking and sustaining. The spiritual framework reinforces sustainable practice from the inside out. Whale hunting traditions in Alaska and Greenland operate on an even grander scale. A bowhead whale hunt is a communal operation requiring dozens of people working in tight coordination, launching boats, maneuvering through ice-choked waters, handling enormous forces when a whale is struck. Preparation takes months. Execution demands precise timing, constant communication, and raw physical courage. The tools reflect a kind of quiet engineering brilliance. The toggling harpoon head, carved from bone, antler, or stone, is designed to rotate 90 degrees after penetrating tissue, locking itself inside so it cannot be pulled free. This is not a sharpened stick. It is a mechanical device with moving parts, perfected through centuries of iterative refinement, each generation building on observations from the last. When a whale is brought in, the distribution of the catch follows strict social rules. Every family in the community receives a share. The allocation isn't based on who participated most or who holds the highest rank. It is based on need and on custom, a system designed so that no family goes hungry while others feast. This redistribution is structural. It is how communities endure in an environment where cooperation isn't a nice idea but an absolute requirement. The same principle extends to smaller hunts. When a hunter brings home a seal, the meat is divided according to established practice. Specific cuts go to specific relatives. The hunter's own family doesn't necessarily get the biggest portion. The system creates obligations flowing in multiple directions, a web of mutual dependence that holds the social fabric together through seasons of scarcity and abundance alike. And now, the question of how to keep food in a place where almost none of it grows. The traditional Arctic diet draws approximately 50% of its calories from fat, 30 to 35% from protein, and 15 to 20% from carbohydrates. That carbohydrate fraction is higher than many nutritionists once assumed, because raw and freshly frozen meat retains dietary glycogen, a form of stored sugar in animal tissue that cooking destroys. This is one reason raw meat has been central to the traditional diet, not because cooking technology was unavailable. Inuit communities have used oil lamps and fire for thousands of years, but eating meat raw preserves nutrients that heat would eliminate. The most important of those nutrients is vitamin C. For generations, Western scientists couldn't explain why Inuit populations didn't develop scurvy. Here were people eating virtually no fruits or vegetables for large stretches of the year, living where plant life barely exists. European sailors on far shorter voyages lost their teeth, bled from their gums, and died. But Arctic communities didn't. A 2021 reanalysis of nutritional data from East Greenland, originally collected in the years 1936 and 1937, showed the answer is more complex than anyone first assumed. The primary source of vitamin C turned out to be algae. One species called Alaria pileae contains 44 milligrams per 100 grams. Another genus, Fucus, ranges from 13 to 77 milligrams. These algae were consumed by 67 to 71% of the population that was studied. Organ meats provided critical backup. Seal adrenal glands contain 127 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams, more than you'd get from an orange. Cod roe holds 44 milligrams. Liver from various animals ranges between 9 and 23 milligrams. Raw caribou liver supplies close to 24 milligrams per 100 grams. Seal brain about 15. Raw kelp more than 28. And then there is muktuk. Muktuk is the skin and blubber of whales, most often bowhead, beluga, or narwhal. Per 100 grams of bowhead whale muktuk, there are 465 calories, over 46 grams of fat, and about 12.5 grams of protein. The outer skin layer contains up to 38 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams, making it one of the richest animal sources of ascorbic acid known anywhere. British Arctic explorers specifically sought it out to ward off scurvy. Early accounts describe narwhal skin as tasting like hazelnuts. But the data also carry a sobering detail. Blood vitamin C levels from the 1930s survey revealed that 47% of the sampled population had low levels, and 18% had concentrations technically consistent with scurvy, though clinical scurvy was never actually observed. Researchers concluded the Inuit likely lived, as they put it, on the edge of scurvy. Algae intake, raw organ meats, and possibly a unique genetic protection involving haptoglobin protein distribution collectively held them just above the danger line. Fermentation adds another layer to Arctic food technology. Entire seal or bird carcasses buried beneath intact skin, with blubber undergo controlled microbial transformation over weeks or months. Proteins break down, flavors concentrate, nutrients become more available. This isn't spoilage. It is a deliberate, managed process producing foods with distinctive taste profiles and nutritional properties that fresh meat alone can't provide. Permafrost itself served as a natural deep freezer for thousands of years. Families cached food in the permanently frozen ground, where it stayed preserved at stable sub-zero temperatures regardless of what happened at the surface. Meat stored this way could remain edible for months, even years. But here's what matters now. Permafrost is thawing. Across the Arctic, ground temperatures are rising. Food caches that remained reliably frozen for generations are at risk of spoiling. The deep freezer that the Earth itself provided is losing its reliability, a quiet but profound disruption to a food system that has functioned since mammoths walked the tundra. Inuit elders have long held that eating raw meat keeps you warmer and stronger, and there's a physiological basis for this. Protein metabolism generates more body heat than fat or carbohydrate metabolism through a process called diet-induced thermogenesis. One elder described it simply: Inuit food generates a strong flow of blood, a condition considered healthy and a sign of a strong body. The CPT-1A variant discussed earlier ties directly into this dietary picture. Early metabolic studies found that Inuit subjects had lower respiratory quotients, indicating very efficient fat burning, combined with paradoxically low ketone levels. The Arctic variant appears to allow the body to burn fat cleanly without tipping into dangerous ketosis, even on a diet that provides almost no carbohydrates but enormous quantities of marine-derived polyunsaturated fatty acids. The diet shaped the genome across thousands of years of natural selection, and the genome enabled the diet to sustain life where no farm, orchard, or garden could ever take root. That partnership between culture and biology is written in DNA and in recipes handed from mother to daughter across 10,000 years of unbroken tradition. Let your thoughts drift gently now, as we turn to the words these communities speak and how those words carry the weight of survival itself. You may have heard the claim that Inuit languages have many words for snow. This idea has circulated, been debated, sometimes inflated, and occasionally dismissed outright for over a century, going back to the anthropologist Franz Bauwers, who noted 4 snow roots in Inuktitut in 1911. A sweeping computational analysis published in 2025 put the question to a broader test. Researchers examined over 1,500 bilingual dictionaries across 616 languages. The results confirmed that all 3 Inuit languages in the dataset, Eastern Canadian Inuktitut, Western Canadian Inuktitut, and North Alaskan Inupiatan, appear in the top 20 languages worldwide for richness of vocabulary in the domain of snow. But the raw count of words only scratches the surface. What matters is what these words actually do. Linguist Igor Krupnik and colleagues mapped the vocabulary of roughly 10 Inuit and Yupik dialects. Central Siberian Yupik has 40 terms for snow. The Nunavik dialect of Inuktitut has at least 53, including Matsarudi, which describes wet snow suitable for icing sleigh runners, and Pukak, crystalline powder snow that resembles salt grains. The Inupiaq language spoken in Wales, Alaska, has 70 terms for ice alone. 70. Among them, Udukak, ice that persists from year to year. Seguliaxrak, patchwork crystals forming as the sea begins to freeze. Onik, ice riddled with holes. The Sami languages of northern Scandinavia hold between 180 and 300 words for snow, ice, tracks in snow, and conditions of snow use. Each of these terms isn't just descriptive, it's predictive. It encodes specific information about travel safety, animal behavior, wind direction, and seasonal timing. The word Nataruviak, meaning flooring snow, describes a particular layer in the snowpack that indicates good conditions for seal nursery, layers beneath the surface, and smoother travel on the ice above. One word, a paragraph of information for the person who knows what it means. The SIKU platform, a digital tool created by the Arctic Eider Society in partnership with Inuit communities, now has over 34,000 users combining local knowledge with satellite imagery, weather data, and photographs. Inuit hunters recognize over 30 categories of sea ice on this platform. Words like sikuliak for young ice and siku for established sea ice. These categories merge thousands of years of traditional observation with 21st century remote sensing. A single ice term shared by a hunter on the ground can carry more local precision than a RADARSAT satellite image taken from orbit. The Sami languages tell a parallel story, focused not on ice but on reindeer. Hundreds of words describe individual animals by age, coat color, antler shape, temperament. A single reindeer can be described with a specificity that most English speakers reserve for identifying dog breeds. This vocabulary isn't academic curiosity, it's a working tool. A herder uses these exact words to communicate precise information about specific animals, in conditions where accuracy can mean the difference between recovering a lost animal and losing it to a blizzard. When a language disappears, this vocabulary goes with it. And with the vocabulary goes environmental knowledge that took millennia to build, knowledge about ice safety, animal patterns, weather cycles, and seasonal rhythms that can't be easily rebuilt from satellite data and thermometers alone. Oral tradition is the vehicle that carries all of this knowledge across generations. Stories told during long winter nights carry survival information folded into narrative form. A story about a hunter who ignored a specific wind pattern and became lost is not entertainment. It is a lesson, practical, specific, and easy to remember precisely, because it's wrapped in the emotional architecture of a story. The neuroscience of how this works circles back to the hippocampus. The brain doesn't file information in neat folders. It stores things in associative webs, linking places to events to emotions to textures and sounds. A story about a hunt on the sea ice fires up spatial memory, emotional memory, and procedural memory all at once. The lesson sticks because it's woven into a rich network of mental connections. A 2021 study demonstrated this beautifully. Researchers tested Australian Aboriginal memory techniques with medical students who had no prior exposure to Indigenous learning methods. After a single short training session using place-based narrative recall, the students showed clear, measurable improvements in memory performance. These aren't culturally locked abilities. They are universal cognitive mechanisms that indigenous traditions have optimized over extraordinary stretches of time, at least 50,000 years for Aboriginal Australian songlines, and at least 20,000 in the Arctic. Scholars describe 6 foundations that underpin indigenous memory practice. Locatedness, meaning knowledge embedded in specific places. Relatedness, meaning knowledge structured as relationships. Embodiment, knowledge held in physical action. Orality, knowledge carried in speech. Narrative, knowledge organized as story. And imagery, knowledge reinforced through visual symbols. These aren't separate tricks. They form a coherent system, a set of what researchers call cultural technologies for producing, preserving, and transmitting knowledge. The Inuit have a word for the sum of all this. We'll come back to it near the end. Now let us talk about what you wear when the wind chill could kill you in 20 minutes. In the Arctic, clothing isn't about appearance. It is engineering. And the engineering principles woven into traditional garments are so effective that modern synthetic materials often fall short in sustained extreme cold. The caribou skin parka stands at the center. It's built with two layers, an inner one with fur facing inward against the body, and an outer one with fur facing outward against the wind. Between them sits a pocket of trapped dead air. Dead air is one of the most effective insulators available anywhere. Laboratory tests have put numbers to the advantage. Winter caribou pelt achieves 5.4 kilo of insulation in still air. 1 kilo equals the insulation needed to keep a resting person comfortable at 21 degrees Celsius. Winter deer fur reaches 4.33. Arctic wolf hits 3.94. Raccoon gets to 3.09. Beaver manages 2.23. Mohair pile fabric, a common industrial material, provides just 1.5. But the real advantage isn't warmth in still air, it's wind resistance. At 25 miles per hour, winter caribou fur retains 58% of its still air insulation value. Winter deer retains only 38%. The difference comes down to structure. Caribou hair is hollow and cellular, trapping air both between and within individual hairs. The hair is close-backed and moderately rigid, resisting the compression that wind forces onto softer furs. A Canadian military study compared Inuit caribou clothing head-to-head against modern military cold-weather gear and commercial synthetic outerwear. The results were definitive. The caribou outfit actually raised chest temperature by about 1 degree Celsius over the test period. The military outfit merely maintained temperature. The commercial outfit allowed a 1 degree drop. For face protection, the gap was even wider. Both military and commercial gear permitted a 12-degree drop in cheek temperature. The caribou hood, which uses a ruff of fur trim to create a pocket of still air around the face, allowed only a 4-degree drop. Seal intestine provided another branch of this engineering tradition. Cleaned, split, and sewn into panels using waterproof stitching techniques, it created garments that were translucent, lightweight, and fully effective against rain and sea spray, functioning like a modern rain jacket designed thousands of years before synthetic waterproof membranes existed. Hammock boots made from sealskin used grass insulation liners for moisture management. In sub-zero conditions, sweat from your foot can freeze inside a boot, destroying its insulating ability and creating a situation that becomes dangerous fast. The grass liners wick moisture away from skin and can be removed each evening for drying. Simple, effective, a problem that modern boot designers address with multi-layer synthetic systems was solved with dried grass. A 2020 study described traditional Arctic fur clothing as the product of biomimetic appropriation, adopting the thermal strategies that living caribou evolved over millions of years, including hollow insulating hairs, layered fur density, and wind-resistant surface structure. The women who designed and sewed these garments understood, through observation and refinement passed across countless generations, principles that Western science wouldn't formally articulate until the 20th century. From what wraps the body, we turn to what shelters it. The igloo, you've seen pictures, but most people who recognize its shape don't grasp the thermal engineering packed inside. An igloo is not a passive snow hut. It's an active thermal system managing heat, airflow, and moisture with a precision that modern engineers have analyzed in admiring detail. Snow, despite feeling cold against your hand, works as an excellent insulator. This sounds contradictory until you consider what snow actually is: a matrix of ice crystals with enormous volumes of trapped air between them. The thermal conductivity of packed snow runs from about zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.5 watts per meter Kelvin, depending on density. For comparison, still air sits at 0.024. Snow isn't quite as good an insulator as pure motionless air, but it does something air alone cannot. It stays put. It doesn't convect, doesn't blow away, doesn't shift. It forms a stable structural wall that locks its own insulating air within its crystalline matrix. A thermal analysis model calculated that with a single resting human body, generating 80 to 100 watts of heat, inside an igloo with a 2-meter radius and walls 0.3 meters thick, a temperature difference of approximately 49 degrees Celsius can be maintained between inside and outside. 49 degrees. In practice, with oil lamps burning and multiple people inside, interior temperatures reach 0 to 16 degrees Celsius even when outside it's minus 40. From lethal cold outside to above freezing inside, built from nothing but snow and knowledge. Every feature of the design contributes. The dome distributes structural load evenly while minimizing the ratio of surface area to volume, which reduces heat loss. The entrance tunnel sits below the main floor, a cold trap exploiting the fact that cold air is denser than warm air. The heavy cold air sinks and pools in the tunnel. Warm air rises and stays in the living space above. The sleeping platform occupies the highest point in the dome, placing occupants in the warmest zone of the vertical temperature gradient. A small ventilation hole at the top, called a cathack, creates a convective loop. Stale air exits through the top while cooler fresh air enters through the entrance tunnel below. The entire ventilation system runs on density differentials alone. No fans, no mechanical parts, no energy source, just physics. Over time, body heat from occupants melts a thin layer of snow on the interior wall. This meltwater refreezes into a glaze of smooth ice, which is stronger, more weatherproof, and slightly different in its thermal properties from the original snow blocks. The igloo improves itself through habitation. It gets better the longer you live in it. Even the floor has a purpose. It stays near the freezing point, cold enough to work as a natural refrigerator for storing meat and fish. The semi-subterranean Carmack used by some communities applied even more advanced principles. By digging 3 to 4 feet into the ground, builders anchored their homes in the thermal mass of permafrost, which stays at a stable temperature just below freezing no matter how wildly the air above swings. A single oil lamp, called a quilic, could warm the interior to between 15 and 21 degrees Celsius. One researcher described the Carmack not as a container, but as an active thermal machine. The Sami and Nenets peoples of northern Scandinavia and Siberia built sod houses, semi-underground structures roofed with birch bark and turf, tapping the same principle. Below the surface, the ground temperature barely fluctuates between summer and winter. You let the earth do the insulating work. The Nenets reindeer herders use a portable shelter called a chum, a conical tent of reindeer hide stretched over long wooden poles. It can go up in under an hour and come down just as fast because the Nenets follow their herds across huge stretches of tundra, making camp wherever the reindeer pause. The chum isn't as thermally efficient as an igloo. It doesn't need to be. It needs to be portable. And in that trade-off between insulation and mobility, the chum represents a different but equally elegant answer to the same question. Each type of shelter reflects the specific life its builders led. Coastal Inuit hunting marine mammals from fixed locations built permanent structures optimized for heat retention. Nomadic herders tracking migrating animals built portable ones optimized for quick assembly. The architecture matched the way of life. The way of life followed the animals. The spiritual life of Arctic communities isn't a separate category, a thing reserved for special occasions in dedicated buildings. It runs through everything. The hunt, the meal, the naming of a child, the telling of stories during the long, dark months. Across many Arctic cultures, shamanic traditions placed a mediator between the human world and the spirit world. Among the Inuit, this figure was the Angakuk, a person who could enter altered states, communicate with spirits, identify causes of illness or misfortune, and negotiate with forces that controlled the availability of animals. One of the most important figures in Inuit mythology is Sedna, the sea goddess. The story varies between communities, but in its most widespread form, Sedna is a young woman thrown from a boat by her father during a storm. As she clung to the edge, her fingers were cut away. Each severed finger became a sea creature: seals, walruses, whales, other marine life. Sedna sank to the ocean floor and became the mother of all sea animals. Hunters must show her respect to receive her gifts. When taboos are violated or gratitude is neglected, Sedna withholds the animals, and the community goes hungry. The Angakuk might travel in trance to the ocean bottom to comb Sedna's tangled hair, a ritual act of care and apology meant to restore the relationship and bring the animals back. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a regulatory system. The story encodes behavioral expectations around hunting, respect for what is taken, consequences for greed, rewards for patience and humility. The spiritual narrative and the ecological practice push in the same direction. Drum dancing and throat singing serve as rhythmic practices used in ceremony, storytelling, and social connection. Inuit throat singing, called Kadajak, is typically performed by two women standing face to face, producing rhythmic vocal sounds that interlock in layered patterns. One leads, the other responds, and the two voices weave into a single pulsing texture. The practice is musical, competitive, and deeply social, often ending in shared laughter when one singer loses the thread. Among the Sami, the joik is a vocal tradition unlike most Western music. A joik isn't a song about something. It is something. Each person, animal, or place has its own unique joik, a melodic identity as distinctive as a face. To joik a person is to call up their presence, their essential quality. It is considered one of the oldest continuous musical forms in Europe, predating written Scandinavian history by thousands of years. Seasonal ceremonies mark the great transitions of the Arctic year. The return of the sun after months of polar darkness is among the most significant. In communities where the sun drops below the horizon for weeks or months, its first reappearance is an event that reaches beyond the practical into the spiritual. The light returns. The long darkness ends. The cycle continues. These celebrations are not about excitement. They are about renewal, about the simple, enormous fact that the sun has come back and life will go on for another year. The way knowledge moves between generations deserves its own quiet attention. It doesn't look like schooling. No textbooks, no classrooms, no grades. Learning happens by watching, listening, and very gradually beginning to participate. An Inuit child learns to process a seal not by sitting through a lesson, but by watching an elder do it. Year after year, observing the cuts, the careful handling, the way the animal is treated with respect throughout. The child might watch for several years before attempting even a small part of the work. There is no rush. This is a skill needed for a lifetime, and the learning unfolds at whatever pace the child's readiness allows. Children born on the land remember being told to anajok, to go outside and report back on the wind and sky. This isn't casual homework. It's systematic apprenticeship starting at the earliest age, learning to interpret cloud formations, watching the behavior of marine mammals, which turn to face into the wind even before it starts blowing, recognizing dozens of snow and ice formations that carry directional and safety information. Layer builds on layer, year after year. Elders function as living archives. A single elder might hold navigational knowledge covering thousands of square kilometers, whether observations spanning decades, animal behavior patterns accumulated over a lifetime, and stories inherited from their own elders reaching back further still. When an elder passes without transmitting this knowledge, it is lost. There is no backup copy, no server, no library shelf. Naming traditions in many Arctic communities connect newborns to people who have died. When a child receives the name of a deceased person, the child is understood to carry certain qualities of the original name holder, their temperament, their skills, their web of social connections. An elder sharing a name with a long-dead hunter might be addressed by younger people using kinship terms that trace back to the original name holder, regardless of biological relationship. Names bridge time itself, linking living communities to their ancestors and the present moment to the deep past. The social structure of these small communities rests on a single, inescapable truth. Cooperation is not optional. In a place where one storm can trap a family for days, where a failed hunt means genuine hunger, where a serious injury with no help nearby can be fatal, the bonds between community members are not sentimental luxuries. They are load-bearing structures. They hold everything up. Food sharing ensures that no family starves while others eat. Knowledge sharing ensures that younger people can navigate, hunt, build, and survive. Rituals bring the community together in regular patterns that reinforce the cooperative instincts needed to endure. Everything connects to everything else. We can't tell this story without acknowledging what happened when the outside world arrived. European whalers reached Arctic waters centuries ago, bringing trade goods, unfamiliar diseases, and a worldview fundamentally different from what these communities had built over millennia. Missionaries followed, determined to replace indigenous spiritual practices. In many places, drum dances were banned. Shamanic traditions were pushed underground or abandoned entirely. The most devastating intervention was the system of residential and boarding schools, institutions in Canada, Alaska, and Scandinavia that forcibly removed indigenous children from their families. Sometimes for years, children were forbidden from speaking their native languages, punished for practicing cultural traditions. The stated goal was assimilation, the deliberate erasure of indigenous identity and its replacement with dominant culture values. The consequences echoed across generations. Children severed from their families didn't learn the skills, stories, and environmental knowledge that their parents and grandparents would have taught. When those children grew up, they carried gaps in their cultural inheritance that they couldn't fill and couldn't pass forward. The chain of oral transmission, unbroken for thousands upon thousands of years, was deliberately cut, but not destroyed. Across the Arctic today, communities are working to reclaim what was nearly taken. Language programs teach Inuktitut, Yupik, Inupiaq, and Sami to young people who might otherwise never learn them. Elders who still hold traditional knowledge are sought out, recorded, and consulted with new urgency. Cultural camps bring young people onto the land to learn hunting, navigation, and survival skills from those who still practice them in the old ways. This revival is not nostalgia. It's an act of survival in itself, the recognition that knowledge systems refined over millennia aren't relics. They are living tools. They work. And the newest challenge demands them. Climate change is reshaping the Arctic faster than almost any other region on Earth. Sea ice is retreating. Permafrost is melting. Animal migration patterns are drifting. The environmental constants that traditional knowledge was built upon, the reliable winds, the predictable ice cycles, the seasonal rhythms of animal movement, are shifting in ways no living elder has experienced before. Sea ice that once grew thick enough to support heavy sleds by November now stays thin and unreliable well into December. Hunters who once traveled with confidence across frozen ocean passages now face conditions their inherited knowledge didn't anticipate. The terrain itself is becoming unfamiliar to people whose ancestors knew it intimately for 10,000 years. But here's what makes this moment so important. Traditional ecological knowledge isn't being pushed aside. It's being listened to. And in many cases, it's revealing things that satellite instruments alone cannot detect. The Mid-Atlantic Sea Ice Climate Atlas combined 23 years of satellite imagery with the observational expertise of Inuit sea ice specialists. Andrew Arik, an Inuit researcher from Pond Inlet, interpreted thousands of satellite images covering ice breakup and freeze-up patterns from 1997 to 2019. His traditional knowledge allowed him to read details in the satellite data that trained analysts with decades of experience could not. One researcher who worked alongside him described the experience directly. He was able to pick out, in precise detail, each week where ice was breaking up and where it was freezing up. She herself, despite having studied satellite imagery for over 20 years, said she could never have matched that level of interpretation. The knowledge needed to read those images didn't come from a graduate program. It came from a lifetime of traveling that ice, walking it, hunting on it, watching it form and dissolve season after season. The atlas confirmed that over the past decade, sea ice breakup has been arriving earlier than in the previous period, and that the first 2 weeks of November are critical for the formation of stable fast ice, a finding with direct practical consequences for both shipping regulation and community safety. The SIKU platform brings these two knowledge traditions together in real time. With over 34,000 users, it merges ground-level indigenous observations with orbital satellite data. Inuit hunters report ice conditions from the surface while satellites watch from space, and the two streams of information complement each other in ways neither achieves alone. Hunters often detect changes in ice thickness or quality weeks before satellite images flag unsafe conditions. In some documented cases, community members have noticed unusual smells in river water, a sign of shifts in permafrost composition that preceded measurable changes by years. The Alaska Arctic Observatory and Knowledge Hub connects Inupiaq observers from 5 northern Alaska communities with researchers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Since 2016, indigenous participants have contributed nearly 10,000 observations, documenting Arctic changes that instrumentation alone would miss. In 2019, observers recorded a severe lack of sea ice and record-breaking early thaw. One elder noted it was the earliest in his memory that conditions had allowed hunting. Rising June water temperatures pushed crabs into deeper waters by mid-July, something never previously documented in these communities. Observers noted Arctic char appearing farther from shore than expected, which Inuit knowledge holders attributed to shallow coastal waters warming faster than deeper waters offshore. That behavioral observation matched biological data that researchers had been unable to explain on their own. Two knowledge systems, developed thousands of years apart by cultures with completely different tools and assumptions, are converging on the same conclusions. The elders' observations match the satellite readings. The spoken record and the digital record agree. There is a word in Inuktitut that holds something worth sitting with. Kajamajatukunggit. It translates roughly as that which has long been known, but the English gets only partway there. Formally adopted by the government of Nunavut as the foundation of its policy framework, Kajamajatukunggit is a complete epistemological system encompassing values, worldview, language, social organization, knowledge, life skills, perceptions, and expectations. It rests on 4 foundational laws and 6 guiding principles, including Avititnik Kamatsayarnik, respect and care for the land, and Kanik Turanarnik, being resourceful in solving problems. This isn't a museum piece. It isn't a historical curiosity filed away under traditional practices. It is a living, continuously updated system. As one framework document describes it, Kajamajatukunggit is specifically about the transfer of an ever-evolving set of knowledge and skills essential for producing a contributing member of family and society. Inuit elders explain how this knowledge works using a metaphor. They compare it to a bow and arrow. The arrow must be drawn back into what has been known, into the deep past, before it can be sent forward into the future. The farther you draw from history, the farther the arrow can travel into what comes next. Consider what that means. Knowledge in this framework is not invented, it is remembered. It is carried forward through 10,000 years of continuous, careful attention to the world. Each generation receives it, refines it, adds what they have observed, and hands it on. The system is never finished, never complete. It is always growing, always adjusting, always being drawn back so it can be released forward. A hunter standing on sea ice today, reading the orientation of snowdrifts to determine direction, is using the same cognitive framework for interpreting wind and snow that ancestors used when mammoths still roamed the tundra. The ice is thinner now. The winds may be shifting. New species are appearing in waters where they were never seen before. But the framework, the way of paying attention, the way of encoding what is observed, the way of passing on what is learned, this framework stretches back without interruption to an era before writing existed anywhere on Earth. That is what Kajamajatukunggit means, that which has long been known, not because someone wrote it down and filed it, but because someone told it to someone, who told it to someone, who told it to someone else, across 500 generations of unbroken human attention to the world. Let us slow down now and let these ideas settle. We have moved through a wide terrain tonight, not a physical one, though the Arctic has been present in every fact and image. We have moved through a terrain of human adaptation, the body reshaping itself across generations to burn more energy, generate more warmth, metabolize fats that would overwhelm a different genome. The mind building navigational systems so precise that a hunter can cross 60 kilometers of featureless ice in a whiteout and arrive at the exact right spot. The hands sewing caribou skin into garments that outperform military-grade synthetics. The voice carrying knowledge across millennia without writing a single word. Survival in the Arctic has never been just physical. It has been cultural, linguistic, spiritual. The stories told during the long polar night weren't entertainment. They were the medium through which an entire civilization's accumulated understanding traveled through time. Every myth held a lesson. Every name held a history. Every word for snow held information that could save a life. And all of it, every adaptation, every technique, every song and story was built in the quietest places on Earth. Not in bustling cities, not in universities or research labs, in small communities, on ice, around the warmth of a single oil lamp, in the voice of a grandmother speaking to a child who would one day speak the same words to their own grandchildren. You carry knowledge from those who came before you. Everyone does, wherever they live. The language you speak was given to you. The way you understand the world was shaped by people you may never have met. The skills you rely on were taught by parents, by teachers, by the slow accumulation of human experience across centuries. In the Arctic, this chain of transmission is visible in a way it seldom is elsewhere. You can see it when a hunter reads the wind, when an elder names a drift of snow, when a child is sent outside to study the sky and come back with a report. The chain is unbroken. It reaches further back than most of written Western history, and it continues today, tested by new conditions, adapted to new realities, but continuous. In the coldest, most silent places on Earth, human beings built not just survival, but culture, meaning, and beauty. Outside tonight, somewhere in the Arctic, the sky is dark. It has been dark for a long time. Stars turn slowly overhead, the same ones that have guided hunters for thousands of years. Snow lies across the tundra in patterns shaped by winds that have blown since before the last ice age ended. Somewhere in that vast white quiet, a warm light glows from within a shelter, small against the darkness. But there, and inside, a voice is telling an old story to a child who is drifting toward rest. The story has been told before, many times, across many generations, and it will be told again. The wind moves across the snow. The drifts hold their shapes, tongues pointing west-northwest, cheeks smoothed by the east-southeast wind. Stars wheel slowly. Ice stretches out in every direction. And in the warmth of that small shelter, the knowledge continues, passed from one voice to the next, carried gently forward, the way it has always been carried. Sweet dreams, and we will see you next time on Bedtime Science.